Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about how to fix a puncture in your tyre or actually replace a tyre itself. First thing to do is to take off the tyre from the scooter itself. I've got a SwiftyAIR electric here. I'm going to take the rear wheel off. If you've got mud guards, you have to make sure that you deflate the tyre to begin with. So if you've got a puncture, obviously it'll already be flat, but take all the air out if you're replacing the tyre itself. Okay. Next thing to do is take your 15mm spanner and undo the wheel nuts. And then next thing to do is to disconnect the quick release brake. There is a separate video of how to do this, but you basically just pull the noodle backwards and it will come out of the brake lever itself. And then you'll be able to slide the whole wheel off. Now you'll see that it comes into contact with the mudguard, but if you just squeeze the tyre down, you get that away, and there you go, it's off. So now that you've got your wheel off your scooter, it's much easier to work with. You're going to need some tyre levers, and we sell this Lesign tyre lever and puncture repair kit on the website. It's a really nice little handy thing. You can just chuck it in your bag along with your 15mm spanner. And if you're out and you get a puncture, this kit's great because gone are the days where you would use a rubber compound, like a glue, that is. You now get these really cool stickers, and Lesign do this little kit that I've got, they're the stickers there, which are, the adhesive is already on the back. So all you need to do on the inner tube itself is use this little scraper, and you key the rubber of the inner tube, and then you stick the sticker on, and that's it. It's really simple. So I highly recommend that you get one of these for your scooter. So how do you take the tyre off to get to the inner tube? So I like to work away from the valve itself. So I like to start at the bottom, use the hooked end, which you can see here. A couple of little details about the tyre lever itself. It's got the hooked end there to actually take the bead of the tyre off, but it also has this other hook here, and that's the hook around the spoke so that you can get in with a tyre lever, hook it around the spoke, and then use the next one so you don't have to hold it. Because sometimes you kind of need a third hand if it's really tight to get off. So work away from the valve. And what we're going to do is hook right in and pull the bead of the tyre itself up. And you see how I've hooked it behind the spoke. Then your hands are free, and use the next one, and you just go in besides it. And you need to use a little bit of force here. And then what you can do is slide the lever up and pull the bead out. There we go. Once it's out, almost like so, you can then just run the inside of the lever right around, and you've pulled half of the tyre off the rim. Before you strip the inner tube away from the actual rim of the wheel, if you've got a puncture, it's really important to remember the location of the tyre. So leave the tyre where it is, and then take out the inner tube, and I'll explain. So push the valve back in and take it out like that. And this is really important. Keep it where it is, roughly in the same position. Try not to move the tyre itself. And so if you're going to do the typical trick of trying to find the puncture, that's you get a bucket of water or use your sink at home, pump a bit of air into the tyre, and then take this very carefully and put it into the sink or the bucket, and you'll then see bubbles rising of where the puncture is. The reason why you want to make sure that you don't move the tyre first and strip it all off is because once you find the location of where the puncture is, you can then go and check on the tyre itself and the wheel where that puncture came from. So if you've got something like a nail or something that's protruding into the tyre, you'll be able to locate that this is where the puncture was, so that's the problem area in the tyre. Because a lot of the times people take their inner tube out, they fix it, don't check the tyre or the rim itself, put it back in, and they get a flat again. And that's because you've not taken out the object which is actually causing the puncture. Sometimes it's protruded in and then it comes out straight away, so it's a thorn or something that stays on the ground, and you just need to fix the puncture itself. Sometimes you can actually damage the tyre if it's a particularly big object that's gone through the tyre itself, and you'll get problems moving forward. So fix the inner tube, and then once it's fixed, using the instructions that are in the little kit and what I mentioned before, and it's a case of putting it back in. So make sure that you've got no air in the inner tube before you put it in. So I'm going to squash all the air out. So to strip the tyre off, it's really easy once you've got one side. You just literally pull on the rim and the tyre, and you should be able to just pop it out like so. If you are replacing the tyre, or if you are now replacing a punctured inner tube, the process is exactly the same. So what I always do is find where the valve is here. So first of all, before we do that, make sure you check the rim itself. So you have something called rim tape, which I'll pull up here. It's like a rubber tape. And what that rubber tape does is it protects the inner tube from all of these holes here. And these holes are holes that we drill into the rim itself to allow us to put the nipple, which is this threaded little piece of metal that you can see here, and that's what provides the tension on the spoke. So this is an internal thread that the external thread of the spoke goes into, and we turn this to apply tension to the spoke, and that's how we get it running nice and true. So those holes that you can see there, they've got sharp edges. So sometimes, very rarely, there's a little bit of metal that's been left in the drilling process that maybe was not visible when we were assembling the wheel, or when it's been ridden, it's become loose and it can protrude through even this rim tape. So I really advise that you take the rim tape off and you check this for any little bits of metal or anything that's come from outside that's then got stuck in here, because that can also create a puncture. So when we are reassembling the tyre, so you've got your inner tube and you've got your tyre if it's a new tyre, I always find where the hole in the valve is. I find the logo on the tyre itself, and we just try and align those up. So push half of the tyre. It doesn't matter which side you start with. It doesn't matter which way round it is as well. And you just pull with your fingers to get the tyre back on. You're only going to put half of it on for this moment. To put the inner tube back in, as I said before, make sure there's relatively most of the air is taken out. You can have a tiny bit, but don't inflate it. And then it's time to push the valve back in. This can be quite tricky, but what I like to do is pull the tyre completely back so I can see the hole, and then push it all the way in. And then what you're going to do is you're then going to pull the back of the tyre round over the inner tube, lie the wheel nice and flat, and then when you're putting the inner tube back in, you want to make sure that there's no twists in the inner tube itself. Now it will be kind of a weird shape because there's no air in it, but if you just lay it nice and gently inside and make sure it's seated. Because one thing that customers do sometimes is when they're putting the tyre back on and using a lever, they can pinch the inner tube on the rim, and that can create a puncture. So you might have done all that hard work with fixing the inner tube, and then you go and puncture it yourself. So be very careful. Right, I've got that all in there. It's nice and snug. It feels like it's sitting nicely. Work away from the valve first and work around up to the valve. Don't start at the valve because it's harder to get it on. So pull with your fingers the edge of the beading and get it in, and follow each side all the way around like that. And then what I like to do is I like to grip with my palms and I push the tyre around. So you just grip like that and you just push. Now obviously not everyone has got that technique, so you can use the lever, but just be very careful that you don't pinch the inner tube, as I said before. Once you've done that, then what you just need to do is just the bead that's inside the tyre, so that's the edge of the tyre itself, it's got a metal wire that runs around. That shape and the rim interlock together like so, and that's how it stays on when you inflate the tyre itself. You've got to make sure that that bead is sat inside the tyre itself, and you'll be able to see that when you re-inflate it. So I just like to push the bead down so it's nice and even. And all you need to do is take your pump and pump it back up. And that's how to replace a tyre or fix a puncture.